The school atmosphere was bustling. All the new students gathered and walked together, filling the streets at that moment. Snow was falling, cherry blossoms were blooming so beautifully, the scenery looked perfect. The girls wanted to take pictures while celebrating the start of high school. The girls had taken their positions, but just as they were about to take the picture, suddenly the device they were going to use malfunctioned. The screen went black, and it could no longer be used. They could only complain while trying to turn the phone back on. Strangely, the device still didn't respond. Even stranger, after the other girls checked, the same thing happened to their devices as well, and while everyone was still confused about what was happening, something else was silently lurking from the sky. A long arm with pointed fingers extended downward. At first glance, the black hand resembled a tangle of old tree roots. The hands continued to descend and approach, then with lightning speed they began grabbing the bodies of the children who were gathered. The atmosphere turned tense. Screams were heard from all directions. Many tried to run, but it was in vain. Everyone was captured and pulled up into the sky to an unknown destination. The time was almost 3:30 in the afternoon. The atmosphere was cheerful. On a basketball court, there was a teenager and 4 children playing basketball. The teenager initially called for a pass. After receiving the ball, he dribbled it, maneuvering defenders perfectly. Then when he reached a suitable distance, the teenager jumped and made an acrobatic shot. The children were in awe. One by one they began to shower him with praises for what he had done. They were even convinced that the teenager was a professional player, especially since for some of the kids it was their first time seeing a dunk move in person. The teenager looked pleased with a smile. He explained that he was the star player in his high school. Then the game continued. The teenager was ready with the ball while the kids ran to find their positions. While running, the kids asked the teenager to bring his team to play together another time, but the teenager refused, saying it would interfere with his team's practice schedule. The teenager began bouncing the ball, eager to do something cool, but before the action began, a girl shouted, calling out the teenager's name. The girl wasn't alone. Behind her, a large-built teenage boy wearing glasses was standing while holding a book. Both of them were glaring at Po with very angry expressions. Po was shocked and panicked. He didn't expect Sino, the girl's friend, and Ganji, the muscular teenage boy, to find him there. Po quickly apologized and explained everything. Initially, Dappo had planned to meet them at the Agra place, but on the way he saw the kids playing and decided to join in. Hearing Dappo's explanation didn't make Sieno feel better. She became even angrier, her face showing more frustration. The girl was sure that Po hadn't planned to play with the kids after school. That was because the 3 of them had agreed to go to the library and study together. Dappo ignored what C said. He tried to run away, sprinting as fast as he could from the basketball court. Sue grew more frustrated and shouted at Po to stop. Meanwhile, Guni swiftly put away his book and started running for Ganji. Chasing and catching Po was one of his duties. It turned out that G was very fast. In no time he had almost caught up with Dappo. Unfortunately, when Gunji tried to grab Dappo, the teenager managed to dodge by changing direction. Po became smug and Ned Gungi not to underestimate him as one of the best players on the basketball team. After saying that, Po distanced himself and apologized to Senod. Po promised he would study with them next time. Sino screamed again, asking Po to stop, but the teenager kept running, not paying attention to his surroundings. The slippery ground finally disrupted Dappo's balance. Combined with his high running speed, Po ended up tumbling, luckily before he fully fell. Ganji arrived and caught Dappo's arm. G was initially impressed to see Po manage to maintain a good position. However, despite that G advised Do to be more careful about his physical safety, a panic CNO ran over and also scolded Po. She insisted that Po shouldn't put too much strain on his knee. Despite her anger, Sen examined Dappo's injured knee and suggested they go to the hospital immediately, and when Sino just touched his knee, Dappo immediately groaned in pain. Ku grew even more upset. The girl threatened Po, warning him not to be reckless again, that is if Po didn't want his knee condition to worsen, preventing him from walking like when he was in junior high. Back then Po had hated that experience. Dappo remained silent. His expression showed a mix of pain and guilt, so began to calm down and apologized to Gunji. Now Sino intended to treat Dappo and contact their teacher. Dappo hadn't had time to do anything when the kids who had been playing basketball with him approached. The girl asked about Dappo's condition, making sure he wasn't seriously hurt. Seeing the worry on the girl's face, Po tried to reassure her by patting her head. Po then honestly admitted that he wasn't okay from the beginning. His knee hadn't been in good condition. Dappo also apologized saying he didn't mean to make the girl worry. Once again Ji warned Do. This time he asked Doppo not to make the kids he had just met anxious. Doppo could only apologize and promise not to repeat it. Meanwhile, despite the explanation, the little girl still looked concerned. She was afraid Doppo wouldn't be able to play basketball anymore. Doppo denied that. He promised that his knee would heal soon and he would be able to play with them again. Hearing Doppo's promise, Ji lightly hit Doppo's head. Ji reminded Doppo to also keep his promise to his friend Sino, who had been standing alone, seemed confused. Ganji noticed and immediately asked her what was wrong. It turned out that Seno had been trying to contact their teacher, but suddenly her device stopped working. She tried turning it on again, but the result was the same. Ji then took the initiative to call the teacher using his own device, but strangely Ji's device also experienced the same issue. In the midst of everyone's confusion, more strange things began to happen. Although the device screens remained off, a voice started coming from the speakers. The voice was more or less giving a warning to the children that a game determining the survival of humanity was about to begin. Before anyone could comprehend the meaning of the message, another strange phenomenon occurred. This time a strong tremor shook everyone, causing them to fall to the ground. At first C thought it was an earthquake, however Doppo noticed that the buildings weren't moving. Ji looked up and then urged everyone to look at the sky. In the sky there was a thick black cloud. Emerging from behind the cloud was a strange, pointed object resembling a crystal. The sight confused and frightened everyone, especially when the cloud began to turn red. Immediately the children started to cry. Understanding the situation, Doppo urged everyone to leave the area while the trimmer's sub-eyed Sino took the initiative to evacuate the children. Meanwhile, Ji helped Doppo get up and run. But before they could start moving, another announcement came through, this time on Doppo's device. It roughly stated that the chosen participants for the challenge would soon be transported the next moment. The situation became even more chaotic. People screamed in fear as they saw the strange object in the sky start to move. It now appeared to be a hand with a very long arm. It moved quickly, descending from the sky and targeting people. Sino struggled to guide the children to safety. Meanwhile, those present screamed in terror as they were caught and pulled towards the sky. Doppo, with his injured knee, also struggled to escape. In an instant his body was caught and entangled by many hands. Ji, who had initially been running, turned back to help Do. Unfortunately, the hands had considerable strength. Doppo couldn't resist and was pulled into the air. Doppo opened his eyes. His head throbbed as he tried to get up. He was still confused about what had happened. He was even more bewildered when he looked around. At this moment, Doppo found himself in a place that felt incredibly foreign. Although there were still buildings resembling a city, the presence of crystal-like stones towering everywhere made everything feel different. Suddenly someone patted Doppo's shoulder while calling his name. This startled Doppo greatly. It turned out to be none other than Gungi, the bespectacled man. Quickly calmed Doppo and asked about his condition. Doppo felt relieved to meet Ji in that place. Ji explained that at first he thought what he was seeing there was just an illusion, but he soon realized that it wasn't just the two of them who had ended up in that place. There were many others who shared their fate. Doppo then turned and looked around. There were many people of various ages who were confused and trying to understand the situation. Most were trying to turn on their devices, while others were trying to calm down crying children. The sound of a ringing device echoed, startling everyone. Shortly after, an announcement played. Although the screen remained off, the announcement stated that the selection trial would begin soon. People were instructed to read their individual missions. Then text appeared on the screen. Read the text carefully. The sentences were strange and difficult to understand. In the darkness, a refuge is hidden. The red light shows hope, but the weeping of that light will bring despair. If you can find the answer, you will be safe. Show me, I am always watching you. Then each device chimed again, notifying that if they could complete the challenge, they might survive and return to the real world. Pa was still confused about what was happening. Meanwhile, people began cursing and begging to be returned to their original place. Amid the panicked Po and Ji noticed something strange. Not far from where they were standing, there was a large mass. Upon closer inspection, the mass had a human-like head, but its face was terrifying, with rows of teeth and large eyes. Additionally, there were hands with giant arms attached to the right and left sides of its temples. Even stranger, its short body was connected to large thighs with pointed feet. People began to notice the strange creature. They started screaming in fear, pointing at it. For some reason, the strange creature began to move. Dapo identified it as a large, frightening monster. He doubted they could escape from such a creature like Do. The people were doubtful. Panic and despair filled the air, with screams and cries at the same time the monster displayed a terrifying facial expression. It culminated when the monster let out a loud roar. G urged Dappo to run simultaneously. Everyone started scattering in different directions, unfortunately fear paralyzed. A woman leaving her unable to move, she just stood still as the monster leaped towards her and grabbed her. The woman screamed hysterically, but the monster that had captured her seemed partless. The monster opened its mouth wide and immediately threw the woman's body into it. Seeing what happened to the woman only intensified everyone's fear. They ran, tears streaming down their faces, screaming for help. However, their efforts seemed in vain. More and more people met the same fate as the woman. Worse yet, without realizing it, they had been surrounded. Many monsters were scattered around the area. Dappo, who kept running, eventually had to stop in front of him. 3 monsters were waiting, ready to devour. G quickly urged Po to turn and head toward a building. G and Po ran as fast as they could. When they reached the building, they jumped through the glass door, shattering it. Ganji, who was in front, managed to get through, but Po wasn't so lucky. A monster grabbed his leg. Po screamed. The monster started pulling Dappo's leg, ready to devour him with its open mouth. Suddenly Dappo's device rang. This building is a safe zone. Upon hearing this, for some reason the monster began to release its grip. Po was placed on the floor and the monster moved away. G quickly approached Po and asked about his condition. Po didn't answer, still wondering why the strange creature let him go. He thought he had been eaten. At least for now he wasn't seriously injured like the others. Nevertheless, Po felt an intense pain in his knee. He asked if he could rest. For a moment Dappo leaned against the wall and stretched out his leg. He then asked G to try calling for help using his device. G complied and began trying. The bespectacled man was puzzled. It turned out there was a notification that they were out of signal range, but strangely several suspicious features appeared on the screen. What happened to G's device was the same as what happened to Po's. On the screen there was a safety map feature and a countdown timer. G asked Dappo to check the map section. The bespectacled man explained that the map showed their current position, and based on the voice from earlier it was explained that they were currently in a safe zone. This was indeed confirmed by the map. It could be concluded that the monster released due because they were in the safe zone. Pa was astonished by this fact. It was very strange that the monster didn't attack them again just because they were in a safe zone. Po began to think that all of this was just a game. Suddenly Dappo's body was thrown from behind. A monster crashed into the wall with great force. Strangely, the creature just stood still and watched from outside the window. G was certain it was because they were in the safe zone. This meant the monster was really following the rules. Dappo was initially impressed by GJ's explanation, but that feeling quickly turned to shock and anger. In the monster's hand was a child crying in its grasp. G quickly realized that the child was none other than the girl who had played with Po some time ago. Po wondered what the child was doing in this place. Unfortunately, the next moment the monster started moving its hand up and down as if it were toying with the girl's body. Seeing this, Pa was filled with emotion. Without thinking, he shouted, intending to go out before he could step forward. Ganji held him back. The situation became more tense as the monster lifted the girl high into the air. The terrified cries and pleas for help grew louder, making it impossible for Po to stand still. Po struggled to run, but G firmly held his ground, preventing his friend from rushing out. G didn't stop, warning that if Pa went outside he would fall into a trap and do exactly what the monster wanted. The monster lifted the girl's body even higher. Again and again the girl cried, pleading for help. Dappo continued to struggle against G's restraint, but his injured leg made him powerless. In the end, the monster was truly unstoppable. With one strong and swift motion it slammed the girl's body against the wall. Dappo's eyes widened at that moment. His anger truly reached its peak. Dappo was still being held by Ganji. At the moment he could only remain silent and bow his head, trying to suppress his emotional turmoil.